So we have another federal leadership election happening. The voting ends today, March 19th, but the new leader will be named on March 29th. This time it's the New Democratic Party, or the NDP. Looking at the candidates, there's 5 in the running. Rob Ashton, Tennille Johnston, Avi Lewis, Heather McPherson, and Tony McHale. So I'll go through the recent background of the party and what led to the leadership change. Then I'll go through each candidate, their platform, and finally, what went down in and who won in each debate leading up to the election. Now my goal is to do a video like this for every leadership election, federal and provincial. Right now I'm only doing Ontario because that's where I live, but maybe in the future I'll consider expanding to other provinces and territories. And yes, I'll try to get them up earlier. So as for the general background of the parties, you can check out this video to learn about the history of the 6 major Canadian political parties. And when the Conservatives finally decide to move on from Pierre, I'll be here with the info for the candidates in the Conservative leadership election as well. So definitely like and subscribe to stay informed for that. So for now, let's move on over to the left, my left, not yours, and we'll get into the 2026 NDP leadership election. But let's go back about a year ago to April 28, 2025. That was the night of Canada's 46th federal election since Confederation. And having been defeated in his own riding, which was Burnaby Central, and with the NDP losing official party status in what was the NDP's worst election results in party history, Jagmeet Singh announced that he would step down as the party leader once an interim leader was chosen in advance of the next leadership election. But what led to this? I'm glad you asked. On March 22nd, 2022, the NDP reached a confidence and supply agreement with the governing Liberal Party of Canada, agreeing to support the government until June 2025 in exchange for specific policy commitments. Under the Westminster system, which is the government system that we're inside right now, it's basically comes from England. A confidence and supply agreement is essentially an arrangement under which a minority government, which is one that does not control the majority in the legislature, receives the support of one or more parties or independent MPs on confidence votes and the state budget, which is supply. So that's confidence and supply. And basically what this does is it allows for an informal coalition government to form in order to have legislation passed in a minority government. So in this definition, confidence refers to how, in most parliamentary democracies, members of parliament can propose a motion of confidence or of no confidence in the government or executive. The results of such motions show how much support the government currently has in parliament. And should a motion of confidence fail or a motion of no confidence pass, the government will usually either resign and allow other politicians to form a new government or call an election. And you may remember this from last year when the Liberals had a vote of no confidence against Justin Trudeau. Now, supply refers to how most parliamentary democracies require an annual state budget, and that's called an appropriation bill or supply bill, or occasional financial measures to be passed by Parliament in order to have the government pay its way and enact its policies. The failure of supply bill, in effect, is the same as the failure of a confidence motion. And in early modern England, the withholding of funds was one of Parliament's few ways of controlling the monarch. So that's where this comes from. Now, the confidence and supply agreement between the NDP and Liberals was, well, let's just say it wasn't very popular. And the then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was heavily disliked, and the fact that NDP, through this agreement, essentially allowed him to continue to pass legislation left a bad taste in Canadians' mouths. Rightfully so. So before 2025, on September 4th, 2024, the NDP withdrew from their confidence and supply agreement with the Liberals, though they did not commit to a motion of non-confidence.
What the dog doing?
Now, ironically, following the political crisis that resulted in Trudeau resigning in January 2025, the NDP actually experienced a brief jump in support to second place, overtaking the Liberals in popularity. However, following Mark Carney's election as Liberal leader, the NDP collapsed in most polls, with most of its support going to the Liberals. You can check out my video over here if you want to see the Liberal leadership election video from last year. So that leads us to today's election and the candidates I mentioned earlier. So this year, the candidates were required to pay a $100,000 entry fee, which was due in 4 installments, and they had to abide by a $1.5 million spending limit. The $100,000 entrance fee has been criticized by some of the party's grassroots because, it's the NDP, and the entrance fee marked a $70,000 increase over the prior $30,000 entrance fee in the 2017 NDP leadership election. So we'll go by the candidate's last name in alphabetical order, and we'll start with Rob Ashton. Robert Tyler Earl Ashton is a Canadian longshoreman and a labor union leader who has been the president of the International Longshore Warehouse Union, or the ILWU, in Canada since 2016. Ashton worked as a longshore worker for decades and rose through the union ranks, including the service as a business agent for the ILWU Local 500 and later as a vice president of the ILWU Canada, before being elected as president in 2016, representing roughly 16,000 workers across British Columbia and Saskatchewan. Now, ironically, in January 2025, Ashton was caught using AI to respond to a Reddit AMA. I don't think that's the best way to support your workers. His campaign slogan is a voice for everyday people, and his background is the president of the International Longshore Warehouse Union Canada, 2016 to present. Rob Ashton is endorsed by 2 former members of parliament, 8 members of provincial and territorial legislatures, 2 former provincial and territorial politicians, 1 other prominent individual, and 3 organizations: the Canadian Union of Public Employees Saskatchewan, United Food and Commercial Workers Canada, and United Steelworkers. Next is Tennille Johnston. Her campaign slogan is Forward Together, and Tennille Johnston is a Canadian politician and social worker serving as a city councillor in Campbell River, British Columbia. Tennille Johnston was born and raised in Campbell River, British Columbia, a coastal city on Vancouver Island, and she's a member of the Wee-Wai-Kai First Nation, whose traditional territory includes areas around Cape Mudge on Quadra Island, and emphasizing the preservation of the Qualla language and cultural practices central to her community identity. Johnston holds a Master of Social Work with an Indigenous specialization from the University of Victoria, emphasizing an equity and support for marginalized groups. Tennille Johnston was elected to the Campbell River City Council in the municipal election on October 15, 2022, becoming the first Indigenous councillor in the city's history. Emphasizes revitalizing the NDP by supporting the working class, strengthening Johnston's platform emphasizes revitalizing the NDP by supporting the working class, strengthening the labor movement, and rebuilding party presence in rural and remote communities. Tennille Johnston's background is the Campbell River City Councillor from 2022 to present and a candidate in the North Island Powell River riding in 2025. Tennille Johnston is endorsed by Eric Robinson, a former Deputy Premier of Manitoba, Brent Niganobi, Ogima Chief of Mississauga First Nation, Nicole Minions, the mayor of the town of Comox in BC, Will Cole Hamilton, a city councillor in the city of Courtenay and director of the Comox Valley Regional District Board in British Columbia, and Tony McHale, who's also running for the leadership, but this is his second choice. Next up is Avi Lewis. Avram David, or Avi Lewis, born in May 1967 in Toronto, is a Canadian politician, journalist, and activist. Raised in a political family, Lewis's dad was a provincial party leader and grandfather led the federal NDP. Lewis began his career in broadcasting, hosting several programs for City TV and CBC News and Al Jazeera English. With his wife Naomi Klein, Lewis directed the documentaries The Take and This Changes Everything. Along with Klein and several other activists, Lewis launched the LEAP Manifesto in 2015. Lewis is an associate professor at University of British Columbia and was previously a lecturer at Rutgers University down south. An active member of the NDP, Avi Lewis was speculated as a potential candidate in the 2017 leadership election, but he declined to run. However, he was a candidate in the 2021 and 2025 federal elections, losing both times. His policies include establishing a Canadian Green New Deal, supporting Palestinian rights, creating a public option for groceries, building public housing, implementing a moratorium on AI data center construction, and expanding healthcare access. His campaign slogan is "For the many, not the money." Avi Lewis's background is as the candidate in the Vancouver Centre election in 2025 and West Vancouver in 2021, and the co-creator of the LEAP Manifesto in 2015. Avi Lewis has been endorsed by 1 member of parliament, 3 former members of parliament, 2 members of provincial and territorial legislatures, 10 former provincial and territorial politicians, 2 municipal politicians, 7 other prominent individuals, and 1 organization, the Canadian Union of Public Employees Ontario, or CUPE. Okay, so next is Heather McPherson. Heather McPherson was born on May 9, 1972 in Edmonton, Alberta. She graduated from the University of Alberta, where she earned both her undergraduate and master's degrees in education. She previously served as executive director of the Alberta Council on Global Cooperation, specializing in international development. In the 43rd Canadian Parliament, which lasted from 2019 until the 2021 Canadian federal election was called, she was the only non-conservative MP from Alberta. She was re-elected in 2021 and was appointed the NDP Critic for Foreign Affairs in the 44th Canadian Parliament. And McPherson is known for pressing the Liberals to recognize Palestinian statehood, In April 2022, McPherson proposed that the Canadian government recognize the genocide of Ukrainians by the Russian armed forces during the Russo-Ukrainian ongoing war. And the proposal was passed unanimously in the House of Commons. As a foreign affairs critic, she's also supported international nuclear disarmament. McPherson is married to her husband, Duncan, and has 2 children, and she's a cancer survivor. Heather McPherson's campaign slogan is "Change starts with us." And her background is as the MP for Edmonton Strathcona from 2019 to today, and foreign affairs critic from 2021 to 2025, as well as whip of the NDP from 2024 to 2025. Heather McPherson is endorsed by 1 member of parliament, 16 former members of parliament, 5 members of provincial and territorial legislatures, 12 former provincial and territorial politicians, and one other prominent individual, Stuart Phillip, the Grand Chief and President of the Union of British Columbia Indian Chiefs. Last but not least is Tony McHale. Okay, so Tony McHale was born in 1952 in Pennsylvania, USA, of course, not in Canada. And he's a Canadian organic farmer, educator, and political activist based in Huron County, Ontario. He immigrated to Canada at age 18 as a Vietnam War resistor seeking to avoid conscription into the military. McHale served as an instructor in sustainable agriculture education, particularly through holistic management courses designed to equip farmers with tools for better decision-making and farm resilience. Tony McHale has engaged in grassroots activities with the New Democratic Party in Huron-Bruce for over 4 decades, and his public profile centers on merging progressive politics with environmental regeneration, including calls to rebuild the NDP around grassroots, eco-focused policies. Tony McHale's campaign slogan is representation, regeneration, redistribution, and redesign. His background is as a 5-time federal NDP candidate in Huron-Bruce riding, a 3-time Ontario NDP candidate in the Huron-Bruce riding, executive assistant to former Ontario Agriculture Minister Elmer Buchanan from 1990 to 1995, and a 3-term Huron County Board of Education trustee. McHale's endorsed by Tenille Johnston as her second choice. You can see how they both endorsed each other that way. Let's take a quick look at 3 debates just to see how they sparred against each other. As you can see here, I have a long Word document where I took notes for 3 of the debates. I didn't take notes for the 4th one because it was Zoom, and Zoom debates don't count. But we'll do a condensed version, and you can find the full debates on YouTube if you want to see the full thing. So the first debate was on November 27, 2025. It was in Montreal, Quebec, and the moderator was a tough but fair guy, Carl Bellinger, I don't know how to say his name. And through the opening remarks, Heather McPherson was talking about how she's experienced. Avi Lewis was focusing on tax on wealth and public options. Tony McHale was on political economic justice. And Rob Ashton was a Vancouverite working for the docks. He said that he was defending to live with a good wage. And Tenille Johnston was just pointing out that she's an Indigenous mother from Campbell River in BC, and she's a social worker and municipal councillor as well. The first question was, which policy proposal are you putting forward to deal with the cost of living crisis? And what's your solution to these problems? Heather McPherson focused on a Canada Summer Jobs Program year-round for the youth, and investing in housing, healthcare, and especially public universal healthcare, which she called out Daniel Smith in Alberta for trying to take away. Tenille Johnston focused on the free post-secondary education and providing a pathway for young people to go into professions that they want to. Sorry, I have a bit of a cold. Avi Lewis focused on how that he wants to have a wealth tax of 1% on the 1%, which could generate $25 to $40 billion a year, and it could be redistributed in the form of universal public services. And Rob Ashton was talking about caps on grocery prices, a promise to every working Canadian to have a job, is what he called his good job promise, and how conservatives and liberals are one and the same. Rob Ashton is really a Marxist type guy. He's talking about proletariats and working class a lot, so that's where he comes from. And he's a union guy, so that makes sense, right? And then Tony McHale was focusing on the obscene discrepancy of wealth, and how this is actually interesting. How 1 million seconds to live gives you 11 days, but 1 billion seconds to live gives you 31 years. And so people on the street have no seconds to live. So he's talking about a wealth tax, of course. So we'll just go through a couple of questions in each one. They asked for Indigenous justice and reconciliation. How do you think the federal government should advance reconciliation and justice for Indigenous peoples? Now, this question was supposed to be answered in French, but all of them except Heather McPherson and Avi Lewis answered in English. Avi Lewis answered in English and French, but Heather McPherson was the only one that answered fully in French. They're in Montreal, so that kind of makes sense, right? Now they did promise that they would learn French. I'm not saying that they just didn't care, but just had to point that out, of course. Tennille Johnston, she wants to stop paternalism towards the First, and Tennille Johnston, let's remind her that she is First Nation, so this is right up her alley, right? She wants to stop paternalism towards First Nations. She wants to guarantee access to drinking water. She wants a pathway for the First Nations to be part of the process. She wants to close the infrastructure gap, and she wants ballot boxes in every First Nation community, not for a vote, but just because it's the right thing to do. Avi Lewis, he thinks that under Carney reconciliation is moving backwards. He wants to give free, prior, and informed consent before any construction is being done in their territories. And he wants justice for disappeared Indigenous girls and women on the Trail of Tears. Heather McPherson also mentioned that she wants justice for those same Indigenous women and girls, housing solutions for the Indigenous, and she points out that First Nations are the stewards of the land. Tony McHale, he wants to speak to Indigenous people in their communities, and he talks about giving infrastructure, food security, and housing. Rob Ashton, he wants to work as equals and respect Indigenous rights, and he wants to listen, learn, and then act. So the final question that I'll look at from this debate: why is there only one NDP seat in Quebec, and what do you propose to do to win further seats in Quebec? Avi Lewis talked about how the cost of living in Quebec is too high, and Quebecers want a climate change champion. He believes the NDP has the opportunity to take up the torch and become the climate leaders of the Quebec, and he wants to speak to Quebecers in their language, and to develop a clear offer in French focused on Quebecers' needs. Heather McPherson speaks about how she's knocked on doors and met with members across Quebec, and and that the NDP has to be there and present. She thinks that the pathway to success for the NDP comes through Quebec, and that Jack Layton and the Orange Wave was largely thanks to Quebec. Tony McHale says that if he wants to win the 99%, then we have to work with other parties who have a green view, and we need a coalition that's progressive and green-centered. This was not in French. Rob Ashton says that we need Quebec to win, and we need to work with unions and be more present in Quebec. And the language of, because he wasn't speaking in French as well, he said that the language of working class rises above any language in the world. Tennille Johnston says, not in French as well, that the NDP has to lead workers to victory, needs to listen to them to hear their message, embed it in strategy, and connect with local champions, and that language barrier can't prevent us from being great. So rapid fire questions came afterwards, and it was just a few questions. What's something that might surprise us about you? Rob Ashton said he loves classical music. Tennille Johnston said that she won a riding in a challenging riding. Heather McPherson said that she loves baking. Tony McHale said that he's a holistic management certified educator, and that he mows his lawn with horses. I don't know how that works, but it's cool, I guess. And Avi Lewis had the funniest one. He said that he hates musicals. Okay. Giving me Timothée Chalamet vibes. So then they asked, what was your first job? Rob Ashton said that he worked at a liquidation area. Tennille Johnston said that she worked at Dairy Queen. Avi Lewis said he sold cars in the street. Heather McPherson said that she was a swimming instructor. And Tony McHale said that he worked for an arborist. Lastly, the last question. What was the best advice? The last question for this debate. What was the best advice that you received? Tony McHale said that advice from a team of horses I was working with: anger doesn't get you anywhere. So I guess he talks to horses. Heather McPherson said that Charlie Angus told me in Parliament, you can waste a lot of time writing a speech or do something more fun. Okay. Avi Lewis said that in Argentina 20 years ago, making his first documentary film to take, he learned to occupy, resist, and produce. Tennille Johnston said that her name means speaks loud or voice is heard, and that's something that she's carried her whole life. And she also makes a Latin reference there, which is kind of funny. And Rob Ashton's best advice that he's gotten was to be kind to people. And that was the first one. So the second debate was on January 10th this year. It was in Toronto at TMU, or Toronto Metropolitan University. And Mike Layton, son of Jack Layton, was actually one of the moderators, along with Dolly Begum. So for this one, they could speak English or French. So for the opening, Rob Ashton was talking about workers first. Heather McPherson was talking about how last time the NDP won in Toronto was in 2015. Tony McHale was pushing first past the post and how that has to be changed. Tennille Johnston was speaking about the students' cost of living and climate action and Indigenous rights, and Avi Lewis was focusing on cost of living and public grocery, electronic buses, and free transit. So the first question in the second debate was on housing, and they asked them, how does your housing plan speak to voters who need solutions now? Heather McPherson spoke about renters protection, co-op, nonprofit housing, and how Carney promised twice as much to invest in housing but spent twice as much on defense instead. Rob Ashton was focusing on how housing has become a way for rich to get richer and how we need rent control options. Ivy Lewis spoke about how the market will not solve the crisis that it created and how we need public options as well, and a national cap on rent increases tied to inflation. And Tennille Johnston spoke about accessibility, how they needed a diverse public housing plan, and how many rooms are in a home. And Tony McHale spoke about how we need housing solutions now. We have to take older buildings and turn them into affordable housing, and how we, as a nation, stole real estate from the Indigenous. Looking at jobs, well, the question was, what was your plan to deal with the youth job crisis? Heather McPherson spoke on how she wants a Canada Jobs program, but all year round, and free university and apprenticeship grants, and how the employment insurance program doesn't reach workers that are in gig economy. Avi Lewis focused on pausing the AI development and data centers, stealing youth jobs and hurting environments, canceling student debts, and a youth climate corps. Tony McHale spoke about repurposing existing vacant buildings and regenerating landfill sites. And Rob Ashton spoke about Toronto having the highest youth unemployment rate in Ontario and how he doesn't want the tuition as well. And he reiterated that good jobs promise to give the job to anyone who wants it. And Tennille Johnston spoke about how she was fighting for 20 years to deal with tuition, but none of this stuff can be done unless the NDP win more seats and gather more people to come to the fold. The third question from this second debate is, how do you plan to win a seat in Toronto? So Heather McPherson says that to support and don't attack each other, provincial and federal NDP riding associations need freedom to create messages specific to ridings. Tony McHale thinks that building by connecting to people and telling stories of why we have healthcare educating. Okay, Tennille Johnston, year-round organization. Rob Ashton needing to communicate with the working class, and how the ruling class and the Conservative Party has taken our playbook, and the party has to be rooted in lunchrooms, classrooms, and hospitals. And Ivy Lewis said that he wants a reimagining of the working class, and he wants to talk to people in the gig economy. So for the closing statements, Ivy Lewis focused on how people are hungry for change and hope in this country. Heather McPherson focused on how every single person across the country wants to take care of their neighbors. Tennille Johnston spoke about how she's from a different generation from the other candidates, but she has a lot of energy and she wants to be here. And Tony McHale spoke about how they have to throw their arms wide so 99% realize they're with them. And Rob Ashton spoke about how he stands proudly with the working people. He's not a politician, but he's a worker. So the final debate was just about a month ago on February 19th in New Westminster, British Columbia. The moderator was Hannah Thibodeau. So with the opening statements in this one, Ivy Lewis focused on how Trump is stoking fear and liberals and conservatives are caving to U.S. Heather McPherson focused on how families are struggling and it's not about debating with each other, but which one of us can implement changes. Tony McHale focused on being a farmer for over 50 years His representation, regeneration, redistribution, redesign idea is basically representation to deal with first past the post, regeneration to stop damaging and start healing the earth, redistribution to stop sucking out our collective wealth and redistribute fairly, and redesign to shift from capitalist consumer ideology to a conservative community. Tennille Johnson spoke about how she was a social worker and city councilor in BC. The cost of rent and groceries and gas are going up, and how we need a basic guaranteed income. And Rob Ashton focused on how policies won't happen unless we lead, and we need to bring back the working class into the fold. So I'm going to go through 3 more questions in this debate, and then we're going to wrap it up here. The first question was, if Donald Trump imposes more tariffs tomorrow, how would you retaliate? Avi Lewis spoke about how tariff war is playing into Trump, and we need independent foreign and independent domestic policy, and we can't tie our economy to the South. He wants to Trump-proof the economy. Then he talked about public options for cell phones, groceries, internet. Heather McPherson wants to push back on Trump. She wants to raise wages, legislate workers' rights and renewable energy, and stop sending weapons being used by ICE down south. And Rob Ashton wants to create economic security and good jobs, find new trading partners, international trading partners. And he says that he's been fighting bullies since 7th grade. The only thing they recognize is strength. He calls out Pierre for cheering on Trump. Tony McHale says that we need to redesign our economy so it doesn't work for elites. We need to invest in healthcare, childcare, and when the emperor has no clothing, someone has to call him out. And he's basically talking about Trump in that situation. And Tennille Johnson talks about how retaliation strategy is investing in ourselves, and all the way down to the micro things like childcare, and we have to close the infrastructure gap in the country. So the next question, the second question is, why can the New Democrats win provincially but can't seem to win federally? And if you didn't know that, NDP has never won federally, actually. So Rob Ashton thinks that we need to show that we're willing to talk, understand, and listen to what Canadian wants. Tony McHale, the first past the post system needs to be addressed. Tennille Johnston, we need to reconnect with the writings that we left behind. Avi Lewis, our members need to share a bold, ambitious vision. And Heather McPherson says that we need to work together and we need to organize year-round. The final question that we'll get from this debate is an interesting one, because I think that it shows a lot of the... Well, actually, we'll start with this one first, and then we'll wrap it up with one more question. So we'll have 4 for this one, okay? Sorry. With the confidence supply agreement, did the Canadians tie NDP too closely to Justin Trudeau's Liberals? Remember, we talked about that earlier on in the video. So Tony McHale says that this is one of the drawbacks of being in a minority government, and if you're going to agree, you need to be extremely clear of what you want. Heather McPherson thinks that the agreement was important, but we need electoral reform, and the role as the opposition is to hold the government accountable. She says that Carney's all about corporate interests. Avi Lewis says that what we had was a failure to communicate, and he says that Singh was pushing for dental care, but Canadians got confused, and we need to be transparent about why we're doing the things that we're doing. Rob Ashton demands better for Canadian workers, and he says that he is unapologetically loud, and he wants jobs, housing, affordability, and to reform the electoral system. And Tennille Johnston said that she wants to raise the communication through social media and use social media to pull in those young males that have gone to the right. Yeah, so now we're going to go to the 4th question, which is the last one, but it's also an interesting one. And I think it says a lot about the people who are running. So the question is a one-word answer question, okay? They specifically point out that you have one-word answer. So the question is, are you running to rebuild or be prime minister? Now, obviously, prime minister is a 2-word answer, but basically just you say prime minister or you say rebuild. That's what they're basically saying, right? Tennille Johnson says rebuild, okay? Rob Ashton says rebuild. Avi Lewis says be real, rebuild. Heather McPherson says rebuild. And Tony McHale says prime minister. I'm going to leave it with you there. One-word answer. What type of insight does this give you into the personalities and the psychologies of of these candidates, that's on you to decide. Anyways, for the closing statements, Tony McHale said that we need a shared vision for all Canadians. Tennille Johnson said that she's here to drive change. Rob Ashton said that we need to rebuild NDP, tax the rich, build homes, and take our power back. Abby Lewis said that a movement we build together with public options, stop genocide in Gaza right now, and these for the many, not the mighty. And Heather McPherson pointed out that we fight for what matters, public health care, pensions, workers' rights, and that's what separates us because we're the NDP. So now let's take a little peek at Reddit. I want to take a peek at Reddit and Facebook, actually, just to see what's going on there. So for the NDP's Reddit account, here we go. So this one says, did this leadership race make anyone proper supporter of the NDP? It was also cross-posted into the BCN. Or this person is a BC NDP. Okay, we'll forget. We won't focus on his name. But anyways, that's got hurt. So I'm not seeing any names. Oh, Rob Ashton was what made our ears perk up. Okay. As someone involved in the labor, Rob Ashton was someone that made my ears perk up. Okay. However, over the campaign, Rob fumbles and Abby's policies shifted my support. Okay. We got someone talking about how my candidate was Abby Lewis. I guess it still is Abby Lewis. I decided to vote harder left and found my political home in the federal embassy when Abby Lewis. Okay. I was excited when Abby Lewis announced his leadership bid. Okay. So we're getting a lot of Abby. Abby gets in. I'm not voting NDP federal until he's out. Okay. He attracts a lot of difficult people that remind me of Polivier's followers. Okay. It's an interesting point. Abby Lewis is making me return. So we're getting a lot of Abby here, okay? That's just one question, but consider my options for leader here. We'll go through this one too. I was originally pretty solid in Rob Ashton camp till the AI debacle, really showcasing what I really like Robin Knight he has. His team is really not strong enough. He's inexperienced electorally. Yikes. I want to support Avi. I may end up putting Rob as number one still. Okay. As an avid Tennille fan, okay. I have another look at her platform if you haven't seen it already. It's been a slow rollout, but it's come to surpass Abby's. Okay. Abby voted here. Tennille knocked Rob out of second place for me. Okay, so we're getting a big Tennille push over here. I think Abby will win, but I think that's probably best for the party. I think Abby's anti-nuclear. He just prefers new renewables. Okay. Yeah, so we're getting some Tennille here. I feel you on Rob. For Heather, I know that she's the only elected leader, but she seems really status quo. Okay. Tennille, I really do love her energy and passion. I would love to see her running for MP and re-running for party leader in the future. Okay. Avi, knows communication, seems to have a pulse in the culture. Okay. Avi doesn't want to expand the military. Another thing with Rob, that his message seems to be union workers first, not all workers first. Interesting. Toss-up between McPherson and Lewis is based on predictions on who will most likely expand the party. Okay, so we have a little bit of everyone here, but not much McHale, unfortunately. Over here on the Facebook NDP page, well, here's 7 comments right here. I voted for Heather McPherson. Okay, that's it. There's 10 more here. Nope, there isn't much there. Voting is now open. Okay, here. Voting concludes on March 28th. Okay. So I thought a voting concluded today, but it's actually 28th, so it's not on the 19th. So keep voting if you haven't voted. people are not giving away their votes here much, so I can't see. But yeah, we'll see. I think Reddit gave us a little bit of an idea of how things are going to go. So we'll see how things turn out. You know, with elections, you never really know. I mean, just ask Hillary Clinton, but we'll see, right? Anyways, thanks for watching. Later this year, I'll be covering the Ontario Liberal leadership election. And of course, if Carney triggers an election, I'll be covering the federal election as well. I'm also going to be doing a video on the Alberta referendum later on too, maybe towards the summer. So stay tuned for that as well. The referendum's going to be closer to the end of the year, I think in November, October. So it should be up about a month or so before that. And yeah, thanks for watching. Definitely check out some of my other videos, and buy Canadian.